rise together to defend our liberty and unity. All sons and daughters of Africa, flesh of the sun and flesh of the sky, let us make Africa a tree of life. Let us all unite and sing together to uphold the bonds that frame our destiny. Let us dedicate ourselves to fight together for lasting peace and justice on earth. All sons and daughters of Africa, flesh of the sun and flesh of the sky, let us make Africa the tree of life. Let us all unite and toil together to give the best we have to Africa, the cradle of mankind, the font of culture, our pride and hope and break of dawn. All sons and daughters of Africa, flesh of the sun and flesh of the sky, let us make Africa the tree of life.
From many distant lands, our forefathers came, some seeking adventure, some bound in chains. Through battles waged and fought, through victory and pain, by test of their courage, our freedom was gained. In homage to those gone before us, the heroes of lands in the sun, we vow to join hands and to focus on building one Caribbean. Raise your voices high, sing of your Caribbean pride. Sing it loud and strong, till our hearts beat as one. Celebrate in song as we rise to heights where we belong. Sound the victory drum for CARICOM. voices high and sing of your Caribbean pride. Sing it loud and strong, fill our hearts beat as one. Celebrate in song as we rush to heights where we belong. Sound the victory drum. Oh, CARICOM, hele, hele, bravo. Oh, pour your sing, CARICOM. Leve, leve, wow. Hele, hele. Tabo, ya tabo, awo. Naki your drum, CARICOM. Leve, leve, wow.
Wonderful, wonderful. Good morning. What inspiration to start us off with this morning's discussion. Welcome to all. Welcome from our brothers and sisters all across the Caribbean region. Welcome to our brothers and sisters all across the African continent and in the wider diaspora. Our brothers and sisters from the northern continent, from the southern continent, from Europe. It's going to be a wonderful day of discussions. We have a truly exciting session for you today. This event, the People to People Forum, it involves a collaboration between the African Union Economic, Social and Cultural Committee, the Caribbean Pan-African Network, and the Emancipation Support Committee of Trinidad and Tobago. Its aim is strengthening the bonds of solidarity between the African diaspora and Africans living on the continent. Now, these bonds of solidarity, I mean, they go way, way back, huh? We've been involved in these, so it's strengthening, not starting them anew. This is something we've been engaged in, some of us all our lives, some of us for generations. The first edition of the forum is being held within the context of the African Union's theme for 2021. That's arts, culture, and heritage, levers for building the Africa we want. And the Emancipation Support Committee of Trinidad and Tobago's 2021 Pan-African Festival commemorating emancipation theme, which is Advancing Pan-African Solidarity Towards a Balanced World. We see Pan-African solidarity as being at the center of the way in which we are going to help rebalance this world that we live in. So the discussion, the thematic discussion today, looks at the United Nations International Decade for People of African Descent with a focus on reparative justice. So we're going to explore this notion of reparative justice within the context of the Decade for People of African Descent. We are very, very lucky. We are very enriched today to have 5 featured speakers and 5 respondents. We will also have performances from artists from the continent of Africa and from the Caribbean. So let me just briefly tell you who our speakers are this morning. We have with us, and I invite them to please put on their videos so that we can see them as I just call their names. And I will give full and detailed descriptions of who they are, but it helps if our listeners all around and participants all around the world see who our speakers are this morning. We have His Excellency Bankole Adeoye, the Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security of the African Union Commission. And Excellency Bankole, just give us a little wave there so we know, so that we see you and you can be recognized by all from all of the participants. We have our colleague Kuirti Osei, Mr. Osei, Brother Osei to us, Head of Programs of the African Union Economic, Social and Cultural Committee. As well, Mr. Brian Tamuka Kagoro, yes. He's a Pan-Africanist and constitutional lawyer. He's Program Director for the Africa Regional Office. From the diaspora in the Caribbean, we have Dr. Hilary Brown. Dr. Brown is Program Manager for Culture and Community Development in the CARICOM Secretariat. And His Excellency David Commission, Chairman and Caribbean of Pan-African Network. Greetings, brothers, and greetings, sisters, and greetings to all. Now I'm going to introduce our speakers, and in doing so, I will give you their brief bios. Speakers have 5 minutes to make their presentations. Then we introduce our respondents. And I will introduce the respondents as well, and then we'll invite them to respond. So I begin now with our first distinguished presenter, and that is Ambassador Bankole Adeoye. Ambassador Adeoye is a Pan-African career diplomat with over 3.5 decades of experience. Ambassador Adeoye assumed office as the African Union Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security in 2021. Prior to this appointment, he served as Nigeria's permanent representative to the AU and the UNIAACL, and ambassador to Ethiopia with concurrent accreditation to Djibouti. This is an experienced gentleman we're hearing from this morning. Ambassador Adeoye's core areas of specialization include the nexus between good governance, peace, security, and sustainable development. He's an avid promoter of concerted actions for the implementation of the African Peace and Security Architecture and African Governance Architecture, as well as the APRA. Okay, I give you Ambassador Bankole Adeoye. Ambassador, you have 5 minutes. Please unmute your mic.
Yeah, thank you very much, and good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, wherever you are by the part of the world. On behalf of the African Union Commission, I'm very pleased to be taking part in this forum, and I really appreciate the President, the representatives of the Caribbean Pan-African Network, and the representatives of the Emancipation Support Committee of Trinidad and Tobago. Of course, the head of our AU ECOSOC Secretariat, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Let me first of all align this statement with our last speaker, our facilitator, that African solidarity and unity, Pan-Africanism and African Renaissance remain at the heart of the work of the African Union. There is no way African solidarity will become realistic, achievable, without the African diaspora. The African diaspora remains a strong component of our engagements on governance, on peace and security, indeed on sustainable development as a whole. Allow me at the outset to thank you as organizers of this dialogue and to congratulate the Caribbean Pan-African Network and the African Union, ECOSOC, for commemorating the Emancipation Day in the Caribbean. I also join previous speakers in appreciating participants at this forum. As I said earlier on, the African diaspora remains an integral part of the African Union family. Its participation in our programs and activities will need to be more robust. It is a statutory obligation. However, we need to do more to bring this to reality. The protocol on amendments to the Constitutive Act has already invited and encourages all African diaspora to participate in the building of the continent. We must continue to work in the spirit of our founding leaders, of those who conceptualized the Pan-African agenda. William Edward Du Bois, Booker T. Washington, and so many focused on delivering the African diaspora as well as the motherland in the continent as one. Similarly, we have had a number of international engagements, including the Global Diaspora Summit of 2012, which emphasized the need to build sustainable partnerships between the continent and Africans in the diaspora. We have to sustain this dialogue, and in sustaining the dialogue, we have to build effective collaboration with the governments and people of the different regions of the world particularly where the African diaspora is located. It is in this context that we have instituted a program of regional consultative conferences as a vehicle for consultation with the various diaspora stakeholders around the world. We believe working with this Caribbean forum, the network, gives us the opportunity to demonstrate that the African Union stands ready to engage other citizens in the diaspora of African descent in the same manner and ways of doing our role. Definitely, you are aware of Africa's Agenda 2063 as a game changer, and knowing fully well as well that the United Nations General Assembly has also proclaimed 2015 to 2024 as the International Decade of People of African Descent. This is important for us to bring together the experiences in economic, social, cultural, political rights of the people of Africa, and wherever their other components are available. It is important that we continue to work together to ensure that the African Union remains the center, the home to all Africans. We recognize in this context the work of the United Nations, the role of the African Union Assembly in declaring in 2013 and recognizing the Nelson Mandela Decade for Reconciliation in Africa, 2014 to 2024. Let me assure you that we will continue to support the work of the African Union and CARICOM. The inter-regional mechanism will need to be emphasized based on two objectives: to galvanize global action and encourage states who bear responsibility for the millions of women and of African women and men, children who have suffered from slavery, slave trade, and colonialism. We must also undertake the responsibility to express for our oppressors, if I may use the word, to express remorse and institute reparative measures as necessary. This is the way our African Union sees the need to work with all Africans in the diaspora. It is necessary that the joint initiative of African Union and CARICOM will make it a reality for the due recognition of the African Union and Africans as the necessary vehicle for change in whatever we do. Let me conclude by emphasizing the strategic linkages between the theme of the Year of the African Union, the Year of Arts, Culture, and Heritage, levers for building the Africa we want, and the objective of this dialogue, which is the full restoration of the dignity of the African diaspora. The Africa we want cannot be excluded from the aspirations of the arts and culture and heritage of the African diaspora. It is on this note that I want to really appreciate and congratulate the forum and the efforts to unite and promote the African theme as we go along for the rest of the year, despite the damages caused by the pandemic. I want to assure you that the African Union fully supports the work of this program, and I want to wish you fruitful deliberations. I thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you very, very much, Your Excellency. And I thank you on behalf of all the listeners. And thank you for that strong endorsement of the need for strengthening that solidarity calling for more robust participation in the affairs of the African Union by the diaspora, and for support, of course, for the decade, International Decade for People of African Descent. It is just a reminder to all our participants. We have many people from around the globe listening this morning or this afternoon, depending on what part of the world you're in. And I just want to remind them that we are going to have an open discussion with the participants. There will be at least 30 or so minutes for discussion. So please enter your questions in the question and area, and during the appropriate moment, we will be able to field some of those questions and have our speakers willing to respond to those questions, okay? So I look forward to thick and fast questions coming. It's now my honor and pleasure as well to invite our next speaker, and that is Mr. Kiritiwi Osei from the continent. Be sure that I have, yes. Mr. Osei, Head of Program of the African Union Economic, Social and Cultural Committee of the African Union. Is Mr. Osei with us? Could he please proceed?
Thank you very much, Dr. Very nice to see you again. Let me begin by recognizing the presence of His Excellency, the Commissioner, Peace, Political Affairs, Peace and Security, Ambassador Adeoye, as well as His Excellency Ambassador David Commission, the Ambassador of Barbados to CARICOM, and to all distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I would like to begin by conveying the sincere greetings of your brothers and sisters at ECOSOC, the African Union Economic, Social and Cultural Council, on the occasion of this People-to-People Forum, which we are very, very proud to be associated with, because it's the first time in the pretty significant history between the African Union and our brothers in the Caribbean community that we are actually bringing around the same table civil society from both regions to begin to have this interaction and to exchange about issues that are of importance, not only to the states, the official representatives of the state, but also at the level of the population. So we are very happy to be involved in this activity. ECOSOC places a great deal of importance on the integration and the representation of the African diaspora in the work of the organ. As His Excellency Ambassador Bankole just mentioned, the African Union as an institution considers the African diaspora as a key partner in the building of the African Union, and for ECOSOC being the organ responsible for the integration of civil society actors, we want to make sure that we are creating space and expanding opportunities, not only for the voices of citizenry on the continent of Africa, but also our brothers and sisters in the Caribbean as well. This is why we have undertaken a number of initiatives over the last several years to ensure that we are strengthening the people-to-people bond between the African Union as an institution and CARICOM, which is the counterparts organization in the Caribbean. In the last year or so, we have worked to strengthen the implementation of the statutes of ECOSOC, which calls specifically for the selection of members of the ECOSOC General Assembly from the African diaspora. We have involved our partners in the Caribbean and other areas around the world as well. In a recent undertaking that we led in order to develop a political and legal framework to guide the participation of the African diaspora in the work of the African Union and its organs, including ECOSOC. We have also worked with our colleagues from CPAN to bring in temporary representation from the Caribbean community into the ECOSOC General Assembly, while we work to formalize the participation of the diaspora on the General Assembly of ECOSOC, as well as the other structures of the African Union. As we speak, we are about to launch an initiative that will lead to the development of criteria that will allow us to undertake election of members of the ECOSOC General Assembly, as well as the members of the ECOSOC Standing Committee from the African diaspora. These are provisions that were enshrined in the Constitution of ECOSOC, but has not been operationalized yet. We are working quite diligently this year to make sure that by the end of the year we are able to arrive at a set of criteria that will apply to allow us to finally bring on board formally the representation of the African diaspora into the ECOSOC General Assembly, something that we are very proud of. So we are very happy to have reconnected with our partners in CPAN this year. We are working as we speak also on rolling out, in addition to this People and People Forum, also a cultural heritage exchange program between our brothers in the Caribbean and countries in Africa as well. So these are all things that we hope to be able to implement with the close collaboration of CPAN and CARICOM and related organizations in the Caribbean. And I would like to take this opportunity to really warmly express our sincere solidarity with all of our brothers in the Caribbean on the occasion of the emancipation commemoration of 2021. We wish we would have been able to be with you in person, but we hope that as time goes on and things get better in the world, hopefully the next time that we are doing this, we'll be with you in person. So allow me to again express the warm fraternal greetings from ECOSOC and to wish all of us a successful forum. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Brother and Mr. Osei. and thank you for that warm greeting on Emancipation Day. You know, for us, that is very, very special to our hearts because it is the moment that we mark across the English-speaking Caribbean, the end of chattel slavery. It is that period where our foreparents, our grandparents, our great-great-grandparents sacrificed and fought, beginning, of course, with our brothers and sisters in Haiti, the end, bringing about the end of the most inhumane conditions that the world has seen, which is the enslavement and ownership of one group of people by another. So this for us is always a very important moment, and we view the marking of that moment very seriously. So we thank you very much, our brother, for that remembrance. It's now my pleasure, because we are introducing our first group of speakers from the continent. So it is my pleasure as well to introduce Mr. Brian Tamuka Kagoro, Pan-Africanist and constitutional lawyer, Program Director for the Africa Regional Office. And then we will follow with our featured speakers from the Caribbean. The floor is yours, Mr. Kagoro.
Thank you so much for the kind words of introduction. I just wanted to acknowledge His Excellency, Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security, my brother Bankole Adioye, Ambassador of Barbados to AFRICOM, brothers and sisters from ECOSOC, brothers and sisters from the Caribbean Pan-African Network, brothers and sisters from the Trinidad and Tobago Emancipation Committee. Happy Emancipation Day. Ours is a long history and shared heritage of struggle. From the contributions that the Caribbean played in defining global Pan-Africanist thought and activism, the resistance against slavery and colonial occupation, the repatriation movements of the 19th century, the building of the Pan-African Association, the Universal Negro Improvement Association, the Rastafarian movement, the solidarity with Abyssinia or Ethiopia, the Black Power movement, the contributions and solidarity we had towards the 6th and 7th Pan-African Congresses that were held in Dar es Salaam and in Kampala respectively, your contribution towards the anti-apartheid movement, and the whole discourse on reparations for slavery, colonialism, apartheid, Cold War, and more recently, ecological genocide. I want to indicate that, as stated in the UN Decade for persons of African descent, the questions of human rights and fundamental freedoms, the questions of heritage, culture, diversity, and the global contributions of persons of color or Afro-descendants to global development, as well as passing laws and policies that implement or lead to the implementation of the aspirations of the UN Decade are key. But we meet in this moment where, if ever, there was a need to reiterate the need for a holistic approach to approaching the question of who is or was harmed by history and by present policies, and how. And the questions of intergenerational trauma and opportunity, it is now. Our collective approach to reparations as Africa and the Caribbean has transcended the question of criminal liability and economic loss to include the social, cultural, environmental, psychological, and even the personal and organizational prejudice that has led to the evolution of multilateralism within the UN, within the international financial institutions, which is innately anti-Black. And it is often forgotten that it is the contribution of Caribbean intellectuals working with their African colleagues that led to the notion of intellectual liberated zones. And this space is an intellectual liberated zone. It is a place where we emancipate ourselves from that mental slavery that looks outward for help. But we meet today 60 years. We're very close to 60 years since the foundation of the OAU in 1963. 20 years after the World Conference against racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance, which we held in Durban in 2001. And we meet today almost halfway into past the date where the UN General Assembly adopted Resolution 68-237, which proclaimed the International Decade for people of African descent. There are shared opportunities, but there are also shared challenges. We are encountering imperialism in new guise. In Africa, it is the new scramble for Africa by the East, the West, and the Middle East. And it's the hope and despair that comes out of the African reparative justice movement that has, amongst other things, looked for reparations for apartheid, reparations for slavery, but also looked for reparations for neocolonialism and policies that were adopted that resulted in the largest group of amputees in Angola, the genocide that Germany had for long denied against the Herero in Namibia, and the sort of genocidal actions that we saw in other countries, including the DRC, Zimbabwe, and across the whole continent. So, and the hope that's brought by processes that my brother, Ambassador Bankole and others have led through his department for the return of stolen African artifacts and resources, and the seeming capitulation by the French and others. And there is, as we speak, a French bill, a bill before the French Parliament for the return of ill-gotten gains. But this is also conditional. And I say it's hope and despair because this threatens to narrow the conversation on reparations. But we must celebrate the acknowledgement that is coming out of Germany of its role in the genocide in Namibia. We must also acknowledge some of the small progress that's being made as European nations, one after the other, partly put to the sword by the global activism of organized anti-Black racism platforms, forces, and the historical outcome of some of the struggles that you have led and that a lot of our forebears have led. This moment is also a moment where we're experiencing perpetual racial injustice, new manifestations of white supremacy, unequal power, unequal opportunities, and the treatment of humanity in an unequal way. I think we have discussed and we have debated the question of vaccine nationalism and the racism in everyday policy and practice, be it environmental or in the area of our health, and the struggles that African young people are waging for decolonization. It seems to me that therefore, for us to talk about reparations in this context, whether we're talking about policing, urban development, foreign policy, or we're talking about environmental policy, development assistance, it requires a strong African Union CARICOM position that's united as it approaches the United Nations to ensure that the plan of action that we evolve for the decade is not mere talk show. So there is a global opportunity for practical action at the national, regional, and global level, and that must be reinforced by transnational solidarity. So beyond the cliches and the jingoism and the symbolism, as we take the knee during sports days and festival or at Olympics, we must also take the struggle within the multilateral space and remind the United Nations that resolutions are insufficient to address more than 600 years of invisibilization, dehumanization, and if you like, treatment of our people, even way beyond slavery, as Chattel, as we have seen with the mass extrajudicial executions of Black folk, mass incarceration, whether you're in Brazil or you are sitting in the Caribbean. So the struggle for the rehumanization of our people, the struggle for a social, cultural, economic, political, developmental, and spiritual reparations is a struggle for transformation. Let me end by saying this conversation is well-timed because we must seize the moment. And we must spotlight specific case studies and go deep in understanding how to build our solidarities on this, but also in sustaining and giving meaning to the multilateral opportunity within the UN. I thank you for the opportunity, and I welcome you, brothers and sisters, to a conversation that's long overdue. Our humanity cannot be subcontracted.
Thank you very much, Brother Kagoro. And before I introduce the other speakers, I should indicate that we have interpretation in French. You just need to click the interpretation button on your screen, and this is going to be useful for our colleagues, not only on the continent, our brothers and sisters, but our French speakers in the Caribbean who are participating in this discussion as well and may be interested in interpretation in French. So please, the facility is there, make use of it. We've had a very interesting presentation from our colleague, Mr. Kagoro, urging us to seize the global opportunity for practical solidarity. And there's much, there are many issues around that solidarity, whether it is in through the vaccine, as he mentioned, or the solidarity required to continue securing the artifacts and the art that's owned by Africa that has been stolen abroad. Also, I'm happy that our colleague has recognized the struggles of African people in the diaspora and on the continent that have made brought this awareness against the anti-racism awareness to its forefront. And we thank our brothers and sisters in America, in the Black Lives Movement, who have really put their lives on the line to ensure that that the anti-racism, African racism is on the agenda. It is now my distinct honor and pleasure to bring you voices from the Caribbean. And leading those voices will be our Dr. Hilary Brown. She's Program Manager for Culture at the Community Development in CARICOM. And let me just give you a little background on Dr. Brown. She has been active in the field of regional development for the past 20 years and is currently the Program Manager for Culture and Community Development at the CARICOM Secretariat. In this position, Dr. Brown is responsible for development advocacy and integration with respect to culture, youth, and gender programs in the CARICOM region. This includes the coordination of many regional activities, including the current initiative to pursue reparations for Native genocide and slavery. Dr. Brown provides technical support to the CARICOM Reparations Commission, and which reports to the Prime Ministerial Subcommittee on Reparations, established in 2013. She has a wealth of experience, having worked on the bicentennial of the abolition of the transatlantic slave trade in 2007, having participated in numerous conferences on slavery and racism. And so I give you Dr. Brown.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Cambon, our moderator. And let me first greet all the representatives of the African Union, the representatives of the Caribbean Pan-African Network, and the Emancipation Support Committee of Trinidad and Tobago, our civil society respondents, and all our brothers and sisters who have joined us for this people-to-people forum today. It gives me great pleasure to join in this inaugural forum, people-to-people, which has as its important objective that of strengthening the bonds between Africa and her diaspora. And in this context, to represent the Secretary General of the Caribbean Community, His Excellency Ambassador Erwin LaRocque. I have also been asked to extend warm greetings on behalf of the members of the CARICOM Reparations Commission. Professor Sir Hilary Beckles, our distinguished chairman, sends warm greetings of solidarity and his deep regrets that he was unable to be here with us today, but has asked me to assure you of his unwavering support and has sent his best wishes for a successful engagement. Heartiest congratulations to the organizers of the forum for your vision, your commitment, and your decisive action, which has made this forum possible today, and thank you for inviting me to be a part of it. In 2013, 2 years ahead of the start of the International Decade for People of African Descent, the heads of government of the Caribbean community unanimously resolved at a meeting in Trinidad and Tobago to pursue reparations for Native genocide and slavery from Europe on behalf of the people of the region. This very welcomed initiative on the part of CARICOM governments really served to build on long-standing civil society activism by Pan-Africanists and Rastafari, calling for reparations for the crippling legacy of centuries of enslavement and colonialism, with the attendant dehumanizing ideology of racism and blatant disregard for the human rights of African people. We know that this protracted period of exploitation is fundamentally at the core of the contemporary reality of persistent poverty among the majority of people of African descent. Systematic inequality and racism have more recently been starkly manifest in the devastating socioeconomic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on people of African descent, which has compounded long-standing inequities in access to decent employment, education, healthcare, housing, other social services, and let us not forget, justice. In the aftermath of the brutal public murder of George Floyd in May 2020 and the related global race protests, there has been a gradual acknowledgement by governments and international corporations of how pervasive and deeply rooted racial discrimination is in every sphere of contemporary society. And there has been an even slower acknowledgement that the social and economic order of division and inequality in which we operate has its roots in enslavement and colonialism. The establishment of the CARICOM Reparations Commission was in response to these realities. The Commission has been very active since 2013 in advocacy, research, public education, and youth engagement in collaboration with the national reparations committees, which have been established in 13 member states of CARICOM. The intellectual leadership, advocacy, and public engagement of the Commission, and especially of Sir Hilary Beckles, has injected new life and spawned a global movement for reparations, human rights, and social justice. The Commission also famously articulated the 10-point plan for reparatory justice to frame and guide the approach to advancing the claim. This has helped to change the character of the discourse in several countries by linking reparations to economic and social development and more recently to environmental climate justice. I would, however, like to use the remainder of my time to focus on how critical it is for there to be a strong partnership between governments and civil society in Africa and across the diaspora, as some previous speakers have already spoken to advance the reparations claim. We know that there is significant opposition in the capitals of Europe to this proposition. In fact, we know that there is opposition to dismantling the entrenched structures of inequality and division. It requires a concerted, collaborative, and strategic effort on the part of all the key stakeholders, many of whom are in this forum today. In Durban 2001 and up until the present, as recently as the negotiation of the resolution to establish the UN Permanent Forum on People of African Descent, there has been consistent pushback on the inclusion of the word and the concept of reparations in agreed text. Recognizing that a coalition between the African Union and CARICOM is indispensable to moving our common agenda forward, heads of government of CARICOM called for a summit with heads of government of the African Union in 2020, but which has had to be postponed due to the pandemic. And again in February this year, CARICOM heads agreed that it was necessary to approach the African Union formally to partner in advancing the reparations claim against Europe, and this is forthcoming. CARICOM welcomes the formation of the Africa Group CARICOM, called AFCAR, a collaborative initiative at the United Nations, which was formed in March of this year, and which brings 68 countries together, or 1/3 of the UN. This is an important voting bloc. And further, heads of government agreed in principle to a proposal made in 2019 to establish the Africa-Brazil-Caribbean Diaspora Commission, called the ABCD Commission, and to explore the feasibility of its establishment as a mechanism to bring Africa and the diaspora together. CARICOM recognizes the important work of civil society in strengthening the links between our regions. CPAN has led the way in establishing close ties between the African Union and the Global African Congress, has been impactful as a forum and lobbying group. And in academia, we have the Center for Reparation Research and the P.J. Patterson Center for Africa Caribbean Policy Advocacy, both located at the University of the West Indies. Colleagues, we are already more than halfway through the International Decade for People of African Descent. And we need to ensure that by 2024, we realize the recognition, justice, and development called for in the theme of the decade, and equally importantly, the necessary outcome of reparatory justice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Brown. And I think this is great news we're hearing. If you have not heard it before, colleagues, you're hearing of the establishment of the AFCAR group at the UN, and certainly that will give greater voice to the issues of African people. Dr. Hillary, certainly we're very pleased to have you share that information with us, and to speak of the commitment of of the CARICOM to strengthening this solidarity in very practical ways, in the event that there are many listeners who are not aware of it, because maybe that information has not reached them. So we thank you for that. And I'm going to move very quickly to our last but by no means least presenter this morning, and that is His Excellency David Commission, who's chairman of the Pan-African Network. Of course, His Excellency Commission was former senator in the government of Barbados and is currently Barbados' ambassador to the Caribbean community, to the Association of Caribbean States. He's also a foundation member of the Caribbean Pan-African Network. He's our very own. We just love to call him that. He is also the foundation member of the Clement Payne Movement of Barbados and the Caribbean chapter of the International Network in Defense of Humanity and the Global African Congress. And it's interesting that he was the first director and the architect of the Barbados government's Commission for Pan-African Affairs, which was one of the key institutions in the region that really led the way for this developing solidarity that we are now seeing happening today. He's currently the chairman of the Caribbean Pan-African Network. I give you Ambassador Commission. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Sister Asha. And let me begin by wishing all brothers and sisters a very happy Emancipation Day. And what a pleasure it is to share this platform with His Excellency Bankole, Brother Osai, Brother Kagoro, and my sister, my CARICOM sister, Dr. Hilary Brown. Brothers and sisters, in October of 2019, the Prime Minister of Barbados made a visit to Ghana, and she took with her what we call sacred soil from the Newton slave burial ground in Barbados. And this is very important because perhaps a majority of the ancestors of the people of Barbados were enslaved Africans taken from that part of West Africa that is now known as Ghana. And that sacred soil was interred in Ghana. And on the casket that contained the sacred soil was this inscription, and I quote, "Let the circle be unbroken. From the people of Barbados to the people of Ghana, this gift of sacred soil infused with the physical and spiritual essence of our common ancestors symbolizes our homecoming." End of quote. And so this is where we are now, brothers and sisters. There is a recognition that we are family, that we are kith and kin, and that we are coming together in a very powerful way. And so those developments that Dr. Hilary Brown spoke about at the level of CARICOM, those are indicative of a new an enhanced appreciation of our familial ties across this Atlantic Ocean, and the determination that we have to come together to make the 21st century the century of the African Renaissance, the Pan-African Renaissance, the century of global Africa. The 20th century was the century of decolonization of the continent, of the Caribbean, where perhaps one of the major areas of the African diaspora. But now that we have accomplished that formal decolonization, we intend to come together in a powerful formation to carry out a reparative restructuring of the international economic and political order that we have to grapple with on a daily basis, to look towards each other, to bring our human and natural and intellectual and spiritual and cultural resources together to build our global Africa. That's the journey we are on. We are not accepting any excuses. We are going to do it. And you know, in a very practical way, right now in Barbados, we have 85 Ghanaian nurses working. They came to Barbados last year, work in our health system to help us to manage the system as we battle this COVID-19 epidemic. Barbados is right now establishing 2 embassies on the African continent, one in Ghana and one in Kenya. And just to give you an idea of the determination on both sides to build this relationship, the government of Kenya actually reached out to the Caribbean community and has made available a building, a premises for 2 years, rent-free. They have said to CARICOM, come, we want you, we want your presence in Nairobi. And CARICOM has taken up the offer. Barbados will lead the way. We will have our embassy right there in Nairobi. And our Prime Minister has said, look, there are 2 powerhouses of the United Nations. There's one in New York, there's one in Geneva. We must make Nairobi, Kenya, the 3rd powerhouse of the United Nations. Nairobi is the headquarters of the United Nations Environment Program. It's also the headquarters of the United Nations Human Settlements Program, UN Habitat. But it also is a location for the offices of no less than 20 United Nations agencies. So our vision is, look, we have to come to Kenya. We have to establish physical presence there and make this the 3rd international center of United Nations power. Because we recognize that part of our reparations campaign must also be to engage with the United Nations and other multilateral institutions to bring about a reparative restructuring of the international economic and political order that has its origins in those centuries of enslavement. We recognize that to a large extent, our nations have been inserted in a structurally unequal and exploitative manner in that international economic and political order, and we intend to do something about it. But it is going to call for global Africa coming together, the continent coming together with areas of the diaspora such as the Caribbean. And I can tell my continental African brothers and sisters, look, the Caribbean nations might be small in comparison with many of the nations of Africa, but the Caribbean people bring a very special and unique strength to that global African partnership. Because of our peculiar history, the Caribbean was the region that for centuries had to undergo the most brutal and inhumane system of human slavery known to mankind. The African people of the Caribbean resisted that evil, that barbarity. And because of that experience, the Caribbean people, the African people of the Caribbean, are a people with an amazing resilience and fortitude. They're also a people with an amazing capacity, because for centuries, the mass of African people who worked on those slave plantations were actually a proto-industrial proletariat. Before there were factories in Europe, there was the sugar factory in the Caribbean run by enslaved Africans. Because of our history, they are also a people with a profound instinct for and commitment to freedom and social justice and an appreciation of the sacred value of each human being. And finally, we are people with a deep and profound understanding of white supremacy and anti-Black racism and a commitment to combat it. So, brothers and sisters, I am saying that this is our time. This must be our century. We are coming together. There was an agreement since last year between the CARICOM heads of government and the African Union heads of government that there's going to be a CARICOM AU heads of government summit. It was supposed to be in Nairobi, Kenya in June of last year, a general summit where we were going to come together, we were going to negotiate a memorandum of understanding for working together to deal with issues like the environment, climate change, health, tourism, trade, renewable energy, the creative industries, you name it. Unfortunately, the COVID-19 crisis caused it to be postponed, but it is happening. Once we get a greater control over this COVID-19 situation, we will have that African Union CARICOM Heads of Government Summit. But as Dr. Brown has said, our heads of government have gone further. They've said, look, we want a general heads of government summit with the African Union to look at our overall relationship. But we also want a second summit, a special summit to deal exclusively with reparations, because we recognize that the next phase in our reparations campaign is to reach out to Africa, to invite Africa to come on board with us, because we are determined that we are going to develop this reparations campaign into an international mass movement, an international cause célèbre, similar in power and scope to the anti-apartheid movement of the 1970s and 80s. We are determined to bring this reparations effort to a successful conclusion. And we will do it because our cause is just and righteous. And once we are able to bring together the combined forces of global Africa, our victory will be certain. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Komisong. I think we can all hear and feel that call that the 21st century is ours. It is the Pan-African Renaissance, call for a global African coming together to really build this new international economic and social order. And we greatly appreciate your analysis of the unique strengths and part that the Caribbean can bring to this partnership between Africa and the Caribbean. This sets a good tone to set our meeting on, and we are going to move forward with all these very rich ideas we have heard from our first group of speakers. And just let me thank them on everybody's behalf before we move on with the program. We have some beautiful parts coming up. So let me thank once again His Excellency Bankole Adeoye, the Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security, the African Union Commission, Mr. Osei, Head of Programs, African Union Economic, Social and Cultural Council, Mr. Brian Temuka Kagoro, the Pan-Africanist and constitutional lawyer and Program Director for the Africa Regional Office, and from the Caribbean, Dr. Hilary Brown, Program Manager, Culture and Community Development of CARICOM, and of course, His Excellency David Komisong, our last speaker here, Chairman of the Caribbean Pan-African Network and Ambassador, of course, for his government to CARICOM. Now, it's with great pleasure that I bring you some of the artists. We said that this year is arts, culture, and heritage, levers for building the Africa we want. And in that regard, we're not only going to talk, but we're also going to experience the art from the continent and the diaspora. So the first artist I bring you is Miss Teresa Ngambi. And Miss Ngambi, we're going to see something of her, and then I'll tell you more about her. Please, let's proceed with Miss Ngambi.
Let us pray. God, watch over Africa. Chuma ndalama pese ukwenda sasa chuma ndalama kupete ziko upaya nyama kupulisa masengo kulakwa upaya nyama kushoka sanga na kulakwa yama mitengo kushoka malasha yama mitengo zikolangala onongeka samalilani papa vinyama vamsanga samalilani vitekwa vamsanga I dedicate this song to all my beloved Africans. Kupunza mwana kumangalande ae kutia panzile akala bulo mwana wande amusukuru zanzalu wanduwa wanyongera mambo wakwao mwana wande sabanzelu ipe mbane akulu muwaluze ni mwana asasule sungani mambo mkwapata wakwanu kuzambia sungani mambo mumutima wakwanu ku Afrika sungani mambo mkwapata wakwanu kuzambia sungani mambo mumutima wakwanu ku Afrika sungani mambo sungani mambo mumutima wakwanu ku Afrika nipemba ine musasule timgwaze mwana huyo wasonga timgwaze mwana huyo wasonga wasonjila wataika aiwala achachacha kunambate kali hulu kaune mama wakusemene kunambate kali hulu kaune mama wakusemene Thank you so much. Thank you for having us.
That was just beautiful. That was just powerful. I mean, we really have been blessed by that voice, that magnificent voice of Miss Kanjiba Ngambi. And she's an award-winning Afro-traditional musician from Lusaka, Zambia. I'm going to, I think that's all you need to know, having seen her and experienced her. I think it's just been beautiful. And we thank our colleagues from the African Union Economic, Social and Cultural Council for making her available to share her beautiful music and spirit with us on this Emancipation Day. And now we are going to move to our respondents to this morning's presentations. We have 5 respondents, and they they are in this order. Dr. Beryl Beekman, she's a civil society, people of African descent, Roundtable on Durham, +20, and of course, member of the African Union Diaspora Declaration in 2012, Dr. Beryl Beekman. Dr. Beekman will be followed from the diaspora by Brother Sekaya Thomas, who's chairman of the Global African Congress, Mr. Steve Reed, project analyst for the Caribbean Rastafari Organization, Ms. Danielle Frederick, director of the Institute for Indigenous Knowledge, Empowerment and Research, and Umwalimu Mutemi Wa Kiama, social entrepreneur and community organizer. So I give you Dr. Beryl Beekman. Thank you, Dr. Beekman.
Thank you, Chair, and Excellencies, distinguished guests, family, warmest greetings. especially David Commission, Excellency Commission, I have to say, and Taikaya Thomas, my mentors, if I may call you like that, my mentors. Firstly, I warmly congratulate the African Union ECOSOC Council and CPAN organization for this historic event. Secondly, I would like to bring you greetings from the Europe region diaspora family. We have also family in Australian Pacific. And I would like to bring in memory our diaspora family in the Middle East, Asia. And I think that I also can speak on behalf of the sub-region diaspora council in the Americas. And how I define this event, I have defined it as a new milestone in the sense of recognition, justice, and development with reference to Article 3Q of the African Union Constitutive Acts, Annex the May 2012 African Union African Diaspora Declaration. And that is why I would like to emphasize that although I define myself also as a Caribbean diaspora, because Suriname is also in the CARICOM strategic alliance, I think that it is good to realize that the positives of the Caribbean community is that they have a CPAN and they have CARICOM, and in the other regions, for instance, in Europe, we don't have African governments who can take care for our business in agreement with the African Union. We know that the African Union has also an agreement with the European Union, and they have also summits once a while, but we are not a part of that segment. So it is very important that we also look at that. And that has also to do with the ECOSOC Council when it concerns seats. In this regard, I can say that the ECOSOC Council, and that is what I would like to bring in memory, is the first African Union Commission or Council that reserved 20 seats for the African diaspora members. So when this official OSEI mentioned the fact that CPAN will have a meeting concerning the nomination of people from the perspective of CPAN, I would like to bring in memory or ask the people in this regards the Excellency Commission that when you are at the table as a CPAN, think also at the problems, the wishes, the hopes, the beliefs of the diaspora that are not living in the Caribbean. I'm happy to hear from the ambassador of CARICOM Secretariat about the agreement between Brazil and CARICOM, because I can realize Brazil has the majority of the African diaspora are living in Brazil. But that is the added value if you have African governments. And the value of the involvement of ECOSOC is that, of course, the 20 seats that are available now, and I'm happy that the official OSEI from ECOSOC Council, he mentioned the legal and the political framework that has not developed yet. So I hope that we, from the other regions than the then the Caribbean region can be part of that development process. And further, I would like to bring in the memory the several European Parliament resolutions that has been adopted in 2019 and 2020, and including paragraphs on reparations. So, and in the same spirit, I would like to recommend the adoption of resolution on reparations during the next African Union Summit in February 2022. And I would like to bring in the memory also the Abuja, the Libya, and the Gambia declarations on reparations and apology. So I'm very aware of what Excellency Commission has bring forward regarding the summit with the African with the CARICOM, and he also mentioned a summit with on the topic of reparations. And I would like to bring here in that all these summits and the preparation to have a caucus of the diaspora. So that the preparations, that the civil society, the diaspora civil society, have a place in the preparatory of this committee of this important summit. And another issue that I would like to bring in consideration is the Accra Decade of Return. What we have done is that we have combined the Agenda 2063 with the African Union 6 Region Declaration, the Sustainable Development Goals. Let me say, all issues that concern people of African descent and Africans, we combine them, and we and we put them in a Accra Decade of Return Roundtable Declaration. This is a declaration that I also would like to bring under the attention of the EACL Sub-Council, and maybe it is one of the issues that they can bring also on the table during the next AU Summit. And to conclude, I have another issue to discuss with you, and that is that has to do with the implementation of all these resolutions and declarations in policies. And what I have recognized also, what we have observed, is that a lot of African diplomats on the continent and outside the continent, they don't know about this African 6 region declaration and policy. So when they deal with diaspora, most of the time they are dealing with the continental diaspora. That means that a Nigeria embassy in the Netherlands, for instance, are only dealing with the diaspora, with the Nigerian diaspora. So it is very important that we maybe we can integrate a kind of, or think about a kind of diaspora proof mechanism as part of the curriculum of the various capacity development pathways for political, official administrations and other relevant stakeholders and African Union's diplomatic corps on the continent and abroad. I'm thinking, for instance, for example, about the creation of slogans that reminds officials of the African Union diaspora policy and perspective. In this way, we can also give shape to the reparatory justice perspective, so that we can also enjoy the developments concerning the African continental free trade area for realizing business-to-business relations, land and permanent visa. It is not, we don't have to wait 1 or 2 years more, because we are waiting now for next year is a 10 years that we are waiting. So, and with the introduction of such a diaspora-proof mechanism, I know sure that this will have an immediate impact on the tasks and responsibilities of the African Union Commission on Human and People's Rights, a commission per excellence to coordinate the issue of the reparatory justice dossier. And having said that, is that we can realize effectively and adequately direct a link to all these United Nations groups in this regards, for instance, in Geneva, in Bonn, in New York, together with the GRULAC, when it concerns the UN issues, because the UN, the Commission on Human and People's Rights, that is the right commission to deal with issues like reparatory justice and apology, and not only that, the implementation of good, effective anti-racism politics. In this sense, I would like to remind, let me say it is a two-way street. What we also hope is that when issues are anti-racist, things of racism, racial profiling, are happening with the diaspora outside the continent, that it should also be fine if we have African governments who can respond. Like when something is happened with, for instance, a Dutch citizen in another country, the government of the Netherlands are taking opportunity to ask questions. So these are all the issue, all kinds of issues that I would like, before the bell rings, I would like to bring under the attention. One thing more, Chair, one last thing. The CARICOM, Mrs. Hillary Brown. She mentioned in her statement on the issue of the Brazil-Caribbean agreement, she mentioned a head of governments. I would like to emphasize that Suriname is also in the CARICOM, but Suriname don't have a head of government. Suriname, because we realize that the Queen is the head of these countries, but in Suriname we have a president. I think that we have also in Guyana a president. So it is head, it is a president, head presidents, and head of, I rest my case. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my good colleague there, Dr. Beekman. I just have to urge our speakers to try to keep within their time limit, please. Otherwise, we will miss the opportunity of receiving these very rich questions that are, and we have about 100 people online who want to ask questions and engage in this discussion. So let's please try to keep our time tight. I give you now, Brother Sakaya Thomas. Sakaya, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, and good morning, everyone. I will try to implement revolutionary discipline and construct myself in a time frame. I should advise you, though, that I got cut off in between, so I didn't completely hear exactly what David was saying, and I was communicating with someone, I think, in Trinidad, and I don't think she recognized that it was frozen. It's what they call time bomb. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the, sorry, not time bomb, Zoom bomb. I don't know if you're familiar with the concept, but sometimes doing this stuff on Zoom. So I don't want to take too much time to deal with that. But in responding, first of all, let me say that I welcome the comments come from the African Union, ECOSOC. Our esteemed colleagues have given us some good update, and I was quite happy to hear a comment that sort of indicated urgency now, the urgency of time to deal specifically with the reparation. I welcome Dr. Hillary Brown's and David Commission comment on what is happening at the institutional level to try to speed the process up and to build the process and to expedite what is obviously some issues that is long time overdue. I want to make a comment though to my colleagues and the African Union to say that there has been people-to-people relationship at the people's level, at the community level. There have always been. I came to Canada from Jamaica some 40 plus years ago. And ever since then, there have always been Caribbean people going to the African continent, right across the continent, doing a whole range of projects, doing a number of wonderful work. So I want to say, perhaps the government is the one who is slow in implementing the people-to-people's relationship. So there has been people-to-people's relationship. And I'm saying this to drive the point home that the government probably need to expedite, put their foot on the gas to get this thing done and get it done fast. If for no other reasons, we see what the COVID-19 have illustrated. And among the things, I was just doing some preparation for a conference that the Global African Congress had last week. And among the disappointing thing is to discover the inadequacy of pharmaceutical research to deal with COVID-related medical issues in Africa. It was quite sad to see the lack of pharmaceutical research and development capacity on the continent itself. Having said that, I could tell you that living in Canada, I know a whole range of Africans professionals who are working in this country, doing precisely that, and at the best of many of the institutions in this country. I must also indicate to you that I'm disappointed to see the large number of refugees from especially from Nigeria and Ethiopia, two of the most developed economy, among the two of the top 4 economy in the continent, the large number of professional refugees that are coming into Canada as a result of the COVID-19. And I'm illustrating this problem, not because I want to be confrontational, I'm illustrating it, the urgency of now to address the reparation issue, to begin to see how we're going to address the reverse of the brain drain as one of the fundamental issues for reparations. In the Global African Congress, we have identified 4 critical areas that is absolutely urgent to deal with on the continent and the diaspora. That's one is climate change, healthcare, reparation, food sovereignty, and security. And those are the 4 areas that we are working on. I'm suggesting that the African Union and CARICOM, we know CARICOM is ready. CARICOM is ready. I'm not sure if the African Union is ready, and I'm not sure why they are not ready. 20 years after the Durban Declaration and Program of Action, I'm not hearing the kind of noise, I'm not hearing the kind of lobbying, agitating, coming from the African Union as there could be or there should be. There should be much more agitation on the United Nations, at the United Nations, and a whole range of international fora to hold the Europeans accountable. We are giving the Europeans too much of easy past. The time for action is now. And let me say this to my brothers and sisters on the continent in terms of the diaspora relationship with Africa. Yes, our bodies was taken from the continent. But if you think of Derek Walcott poem, if you think of Bob Marley music, if you think of the plays, our writers, our thinkers, our spirit and our souls have never left Africa. Our spirit and our souls have never left Africa. And I'm saying that to drive home the point of the urgency for the African Union to make this as a priority. Too many of your sons and daughters to this day having to leave the continent, extremely talented, skilled people have to leave the continent to come to Europe or North America for a living. It's time that we use reparation as a mechanism to stop this process. It is absolutely essential that we look at the 10-point program. Let's look at the 10-point program, and there's some immediate step, CARICOM 10-point program. There's some immediate step we can do immediately outside of CARICOM and outside of the African Union. And that is, there's a huge knowledge gap on the continent in terms of reparation. I've been urging some of my African continent colleagues to let's begin to implement diaspora study on the continent. And I could tell you, without fear of contradiction, that the Global African Congress have a whole host of academics who are quite prepared to go to the continent tomorrow morning to begin to teach course in African university. In fact, we have developed a curriculum which we have made available to at least 4 countries in Africa, urging them to start a pilot project. And if my colleagues at ECOSOC could drive that message home, I'd be very happy. We'll be very happy to share that information, because this is part of what we think is necessary to drive home the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, our good brother, Sakaya Thomas, who, for those who don't know, is the chair of the Global African Congress. Okay, I give you now Mr. Steve Reed. Mr. Reed, you have the floor, project analyst for the Caribbean Rastafari Organization.
Greetings all. I greet you in the wonderful names of His Imperial Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie and Empress Rosario Mene. The Caribbean Rastafari Organization is certainly happy to be part of this platform today. We welcome the opportunity to commemorate Emancipation Day, as it is called. We know that Global Africa will be having events on this day to mark progress towards reparations. Reparatory justice matters will be on the agenda for Global Africa today. We regret that at the time when Emancipation Day was declared, we were not given our proper due. Reparations did not come to our African ancestors. And we have to continue to work towards achieving reparatory justice matters from all and sundry. We thank the Emancipation Support Committee of Trinidad and Tobago for this opportunity. We thank the Caribbean Pan-African Network for being part of their executive. And we are certainly grateful to ECOSOC, the African Union, for this continued participation in this event annually. Reparations and Rastafari go hand in hand. We have been advocating for reparatory justice matters since the 1950s. We have issues with Caribbean governments which are being worked on. And we have certainly a big struggle ahead of us when it comes to the international community. One of our mandates is to organize and centralize. That is why we deem it important to form organizations where we can have proper vision and progress made towards our goals. One aspect that is very important to Rastafari culture is settlement in Africa. We know that the Durban Declaration and Program of Action speaks of the welcome return for persons in the living poor. And we want to know the details of how that is to be done. We believe that forming relationships with persons on the African continent is crucially important for proper settlement on the continent for those of us who desire to do so. We note that Rastafari culture has spread throughout the continent of Africa and throughout the globe. And one of our objectives is to have a Rastafari Global Secretariat where we can look at issues in a very formal way and achieve equal rights and justice for our communities. We were quite pleased to see in 2016 a Rastafari group, Rastafari organization coming out of South Africa called the Rastafari United Front, which we met in Jamaica, and they were very warmly received as being Rastafari from the continent, now linking with Rastafari of the Caribbean so that we can know each other. And that led to further meetings in Ethiopia and in Ghana with an umbrella organization of African Rastafari called the Rastafari Continental Council. Formed in 2018, the Caribbean Rastafari organization, which was formed in 2000, then realized that we can further our goals towards global Rastafari cooperation and also getting to know and develop relationships with ones on the African continent by forming a formal working relationship with the Rastafari Continental Council. That formal relationship was signed in 2019, June 2019, and I will just refer to some of the objectives in that working relationship. CRO and RCC, which is the Rastafari Continental Council, will share awareness on their projects, including aims and objectives, timelines for achievements, and challenges to progress. CRO and RCC will identify human resources across the organizations that can provide the skills, capacity required to achieve the desirable outcomes of economic, reparatory, social, and cultural development of the Rastafari communities represented, thereby pooling human resources when necessary on the execution of projects. And also CRO and RCC will encourage joint projects between the organizations and provide opportunities for income generation for the benefit of the organizations. We know that it is crucial to lift ourselves out of poverty. Rastafari in the Caribbean and elsewhere still are plagued with poverty issues, having been marginalized for decades, having to build our own jobs and resist all the wild efforts to marginalize the community. We know we have to depend on ourselves to lift ourselves from poverty. And we believe that proper formal cooperation with Africans and Rastafari communities on the African continent can help us in the Caribbean and worldwide to achieve goals that can only benefit the younger generation coming after us. So once again, we are happy to participate We look forward to eventual participation on the CARICOM Reparations Commission. We like the words of Dr. Hilary Brown and Brian Kogoro in giving favorable mention to Rastafari. We know that we contributed to building the CARICOM 10-point plan, and we look forward to greater contributions in the future. I encourage ones to visit our website, which is reparationsforsettlement.net, where you can learn of our project called Reparations for Settlement in Africa, where the idea is to have reparations capital used to house and locate persons on the African continent under that welcome return that is talked about. And also to have some institution that can help to finance business development of individuals who settle. And this is not only for Rastafari, this is for all Africans of the living poor who choose to and would want to relocate to the African continent. So thanks to each and every one of you for these words.
Thank you very, very much, Brother Reed. And allow me, if you will, before I introduce our next speaker, our next respondent, and of course to remind everyone to keep it tight, I'd like to acknowledge the presence here participating in this forum of Mr. William Carew, who's head of the Economic, Social and Cultural Council of the African Union. And I think that's very significant that the head of the Secretariat would sit in as part of and listen in to get a deeper understanding and a feel of what is being said between Africa and the diaspora and its diaspora. And we welcome him and thank him very much for taking time from what I'm sure is a very busy day to participate in this very important forum. Thank you very much. And now I move to our next speaker, Miss Danielle Frederick. Miss Frederick, please, you have the floor. She's the director of the Institute for Indigenous Knowledge, Empowerment and Research.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I would like to bring greetings to our esteemed excellencies, Adio and commissions, fellow panelists, and the respondents. This morning is very auspicious with the coming together of the African Union as well as CARICOM in particular. I want to just reflect on some of the contributions of my fellow panelists and the panelists and the respondents. I'll start with Brother Thomas. I absolutely agree with everything that he said, but I have to disagree with one point that he made. He said that there was not enough passion from the heads of government in the African, on the African continent in order to champion the whole idea of reparations. And I would say that it's not a lack of passion. It's really and truly that how we frame the conversation of reparation. The conversation of reparation is usually a conversation of reparation that is located in the past, and it deals with past brutalities and past disenfranchisement and the removal of our humanity in a past setting. But I would propose that the concepts and the institutions of enslavement and colonialism, even though they are legally no longer on the books, the institutions still remain. And we have institutions that are run by the same former colonials that are determining the policies and the procedures of not only African governments, but also Caribbean governments. So it hinders us as a people from really and truly self-determining in the way that we should, in ways that would benefit our community, our greater community. We are usually just manifesting or implementing policies and procedures that go towards a global framework that does not benefit us, that contributes to anti-Blackness, that contributes to our dehumanization. We have to widen or change the conversation of reparations from a past brutality and a past violence that has been perpetrated on us, and bring it forward into our contemporary setting, and acknowledge that those institutions still remain in evolved settings. When we go to institutions like the World Trade Organization, the UN Secretariat, Security Council, we go to the IMF, the same persons that would have developed and implemented chattel slavery are the same persons and their descendants that are sitting and creating policies for the global south. So what has changed? And our conversations about reparations unfortunately limits the brutalities to the past and does not acknowledge the continuation of those brutalities and the continuation of those manipulations and oppressions on our people, both in the diaspora and as well as on the continent. So we have diasporan governments and Caribbean governments who are hamstrung by the same elements that has brought us to the table demanding reparations. And when we look at the languaging of reparations, the languaging of reparations is very cordial. It's very respectful. It's asking them to acknowledge our humanity. And I'm always perplexed by this. But then I have to acknowledge that the persons who are most impacted, negatively impacted on a daily basis by the lack of reparations and the lack of policies that address the disenfranchisement of a whole host of Black and African people on the continent and in diaspora they're very rarely present at the table when these policies are being formulated. In fact, we are usually shut out and removed from the conversation when the policies and they are being created, and only invited to the table when it is the frameworks and the parameters have already been established. And the wiggle room is almost non-existent, and we have to begin to address and stand up and call out these types of shutting out wherever it is found. The UN has a habit of funding and putting money and resources to the things that benefit the global north, such as sustainability and environmental issues. But in the decade of for people of African descent, the monies and the policies that are required from the UN in order to drive the changing of policies from a global perspective that disenfranchise African people and descendants, it's absent. It's almost like a ghost town. And the question is, why are we not demanding that countries who sign on to these signatories are not paying just simply symbolic acknowledgement of these wrongs, but be demanding that they start to address it from a policy and a systemic point of view? We have a situation where we also focus reparations predominantly on the human side, and we ignore the ecological damage that colonialism, enslavement has done on our physical landscape. And because of those ecological damages, our standard of living in the Caribbean, on the African continent, are very easily upset by natural disasters on an annual basis that really and truly should be addressed on a global level, but there is no impetus, there is no drive, because the flooding, the famines, the heat waves, those things don't impact the policymakers and their countries. So I am very happy that we're having conversations about reparations, and I'm very happy that we're having conversations about the coming together of the AU as well as the Caribbean diaspora. But I think one of the conversations that needs to be had while it is we having these conversations is, how do we begin to address and dismantle the systemic institutions that continue to put us in places where we are constantly asking for our humanity to be acknowledged in the form of reparatory justice? I think that's one of the conversations that we need to have. The fact that the Durban conference happened 20 years ago and very little has been done to move the resolutions forward it is very telling of what is our focus and what is our priority where African people are concerned. And for the Caribbean diaspora, as we champion reparations internationally, we in the Caribbean have to acknowledge that we owe a cross-section of our people reparations for post-colonial violence that was perpetrated on them, namely the Rastafari community. The Rastafari community all over the Caribbean has borne the brunt of anti-Blackness from the 70s, 60s in institutional and psychological and economic ways that we in the Caribbean have to have a real conversation about. We see where Jamaica is trying to engage in some repertory justice elements in acknowledging what they have done to the Rastafari community in Jamaica. But we can't have a government that is setting up institutions of repair on one end, and on the other end, children with African hairstyles and Rastafari hairstyles are still being told that they cannot access education because of the hairstyles. We can't have a system and systems that consistently acknowledge in lip service and symbolically that we were disenfranchised and that those disenfranchisements continue to this day. But our institutions and policies, government as well as societal, still say that we are second and third class citizens. So while it is we lobby for international recognition of our humanity, we also have to acknowledge our role in dehumanizing our fellow brothers and sisters. That's my contribution for today.
Thank you very, very much, Ms. Frederick. And I think what we're all hearing is the passion of youth and their determination for things to happen now and for things to be addressed now. And to me, and I'm sure this passion of youth is shared on this side in the diaspora with our colleagues on the continent. We have one more discussant whom I'd like to introduce, and that is Umwalimu Mutemi wa Kiama, who is a social entrepreneur and a community organizer. Can we have Umwalimu Kiama before we begin hear from the next artistic performance?
Thank you so much, Madam Moderator. Thank you so much to all the presenters. Thank you so much to the two ambassadors and all the staff who have made this possible. Thank you so much to our sisters and brothers from the Caribbean, from the continent and across the diaspora. My name is Malumute Kiama. I come from Nairobi, Kenya, although I'm speaking from Arusha in Tanzania. I'm a movement builder, and I'm very glad to hear people speaking about all these movements that the leadership is represented here. It's exciting to know that African people are organizing across the globe, and I'd like to say happy Emancipation Day to all of us. I'm honored to be part of the Africa Caribbean People to People Forum, the first one, the inaugural one. As I speak right now, here in Arusha, Tanzania, I'm here together with the board members, or what we call the coordinating collective of the Africans Rising movement, and he's talking about Africans rising for justice, peace, and dignity. And I think every speaker that I've heard speak before me is speaking to those issues of justice, peace, and dignity. And we are informed by a declaration that was made here in Arusha in 2016, in August 2016, which is referred to as the Kilimanjaro Declaration, which I'll share on the chat. I'm going to paste there. And it's talking about not there's been a narrative of Africa rising. Note that here we are talking about Africans rising, the people of Africa, because there's been too much concentration on infrastructure, on roads and bridges and shiny things that telling that Africa rising. Yet the people of Africa, as has been indicated by the speakers who've spoken before me, are still suffering across the world, across the planet, in the Caribbean, on the continent, in the rest of the diaspora. And we are saying that the people, our brother Thomas and our sister Danielle have talked about the inability of our states, especially African states and states in the Caribbean, to do anything about the plight of the people regarding reparations and many other things. And I want to put it out there that they are not capable of doing anything about it, because a lot of these states were created by the colonialists. You know, a lot of, for example, on the continent, most of these states were created in 1885 in the Berlin Conference. And when many of these African states got independence 60 or so years ago, 6 decades or so years ago, we maintained the same divisions. So I don't know what we got independence from. If we maintained the colonial borders and we raised armies against each other. For example, if I'm a Kenyan, right now in Tanzania, Tanzania has an army, Kenya has an army, Uganda has an army. I don't know who's the enemy of the other for us to maintain those divisions and those borders. So our work as Africans Rising is to start working towards deconstructing these borders, both mental and physical, because we've realized that the comprador elite who rule our states, most of them educated by our former colonialism installed in the flag during the flag independence, are not going to do that. And if the colonialist, the white man, used divide and rule to conquer us, divide and conquer, then it makes sense that the best way to beat these colonialists is to unite as African people across from the Caribbean, on the continent, and from the diaspora. And that is what the Africans Rising movement is doing. I urge everybody to read, I've just shared that on the chat. I urge everybody to read the Kilimanjaro Declaration. Also go through the website, join us. We are building a people's movement. About 2 months ago, I was elected to represent East Africa in the Africans Rising Movement Coordinating Collective. And today we've been meeting the whole of this week here in Arusha. I've just been elected the chair of the committee that is involved in communication and engagement, which is part of what you're doing right now. The chair of that committee, we will be reaching out to all of you, to all the movements across this continent that represent Africans that are and African struggles. And you're saying that the only way we can defeat and we can ensure reparations, or even for the people of the mainland, of the main African continent, is to ensure that we come together and we develop programs that build our power. One of our mentors said a while back that Africa is the richest continent below the ground, one of the founders of this movement, but it's also the poorest continent above the ground. And that poverty is deliberate. It's perpetuated by our former colonialists. How are we going to overcome that? So I'd like to thank the African Union and CARICOM for making this possible. But I also want to put it out there that even as the state institutions and the institutions that have state membership do their work, the people of Africa must also build their movements and use that power to pressure our governments to ensure that these issues that you're saying that are being dragged around, decisions that were made 20 years ago have not been implemented. That these issues start being addressed, and if our governments are not willing to address them, then we change the governments. So thank you so much for the opportunity, and I'm very humbled that to be part of this initiative. Thank you so much. Asante sana. That is what we say in Swahili. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, brother. Thank you very much. We've had a rich presentation of respondents to our first group of speakers. We're going to be enthralled by the Rhythm Tribe dance group, a collective of dancers from the Caribbean now, by award-winning choreographer Aisha Comisiong. So may we have the video of the dance Rhythm Tribe choreographed and led by Aisha Comisiong. wow, wow. We thank our dance group there, choreographed by Miss Aisha Commission, Rhythm Tribe. And colleagues, we're going to move quickly along because time is of the essence now. We're here now to take some questions and have some discussion. There are a number of questions that have already been laid out in the question and answer box, and I'm going to try to bring some of those to your attention. And I hope our featured speakers, our guest speakers, are still with us, because some of the questions are quite relevant to that group. And let me start with a question. I think one of the questions that came asking us, what is the strategy or plan of the African Union for the UN International Decade for People of African Descent? I think we've heard a lot about that, but maybe our colleague, Mr. Osei, would like to try to encapsulate for us very quickly so that people are very clear what the African Union and the maybe the Economic and Social Cultural Council has been engaged in terms of the International Decade for People of African Descent. Osei, are you with us, and would you like to respond to that question?
Yes, thank you. So we've been working with the United Nations, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, which is the lead agency within responsible for the implementation of the decade. And what we've done is to try to coordinate the African components of the decade's activities. So there is a number of activities which are kind of programmed according to the plan of action associated with the decade. Those activities are being rotated across the different regions of the world. And so when it comes to the African sector, we have been working closely with that office of the UN to run the activities and to provide the necessary support, both politically at the level of the chairperson of the African Union and through the relevant member states policy bodies as well. So about a year and a half ago, we had the launch of the African launch of the decade in Dakar, Senegal, where we had representation from across, the globe. Really, we had really good representation from all over the globe in terms of the African diaspora that came together around a particular plan of action that we are working currently to coordinate. So that has been the role that we've played so far. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Osei. Can you direct people anywhere to a website? Do you want to refer them? If you do, could you put it in the in the Q&A so that they can see where they may go for further information? There's a question here which, although directed to our African Union colleagues, I think would be very easily discussed by both groups. The question was, Africa is still facing a brain drain where Africans leave to go to school in Europe and America and never return, which means the skills and expertise is now being solicited from Asians and Europeans. What can we do to improve Africa's educational institutions or make Africa more inviting for continental Africans to return? And we heard our brother Sekaya Thomas talking about what he witnesses in his part of the world, in the diaspora. Maybe both, we have the same problem in the Caribbean, of course. So maybe I invite both groups to maybe speak to this. Maybe our ambassador from the African Union, if he's still with us, he may want to speak to that issue. His Excellency Adeoye, if he's with us still. If not, and maybe our ambassador Commission can speak to the crisis of the brain drain in the Caribbean, and maybe Ambassador to Bankole Adeoye to the brain drain from the continent. And how can we, what mechanisms will this, how can we build this solidarity to support this, to reduce this?
People migrate because they're running away from very, very difficult conditions. The country that I come from, Barbados, is perhaps the country that, along with Ireland, has the reputation for the greatest outmigration. So for, well over 100 years, Barbadians were constantly leaving the country because at that time, the country was in the hands of a white oligarchy. Life was extremely nasty and brutish for the masses of Black people. But with the achievement of universal adult suffrage in 1950, Black governments come into power, Black political leaders taking hold of the instruments of government and transforming the country to the extent where Barbados at one point ranked number 19 on the United Nations Human Development Index. You don't find many Barbadians running away from Barbados anymore. In fact, you find people coming into Barbados because of the standard of our political stability, our free education, our free healthcare, and the standard of public utilities, and so forth. So that is our answer. We have to raise standards across global Africa, and I made the point that we went to Ghana. We had a shortage of nurses. We went to Ghana and recruited for nurses in Ghana. The 85 nurses in Barbados now from Ghana. So we have to see that we're in a situation of sharing. Sometimes we have this idea about the diaspora coming to the rescue of Africa or the other way around. It doesn't work like that. It has to be a mutual coming together and a mutual sharing. So we have work to do. There are some strengths that the Caribbean has that we could share with our continental African brothers and sisters, the governments and so forth. We have done very well in terms of developing political stability, electoral systems, changing governments through regular and free and fair elections, and so forth. We have put a lot of emphasis on education and healthcare. So right now, we could look at all the negatives, but I choose on Emancipation Day to look at the positives, to look at the positive signs that we are going in the right direction, and to see how we can take hold of those positives and help to further develop them. The fact that President Uhuru Kenyatta and President Nana Akufo-Addo in the same year came to the Caribbean, visited several Caribbean countries. The fact that CARICOM and the African Union agreed. I mean, the date was actually set for the summit meeting last year in Kenya. But as I said, COVID caused it to be postponed. But the fact that there's a resolve that Africa and the Caribbean community are going to get closer together, and that we are going to share what we have, and we are going to build a relationship. I think that is very, very positive, and I am putting a lot of stock in that summit taking place, because I think once that summit takes place and the leaders sit down around a table with each other, I think that summit is going to lead on to many joint Africa-Caribbean developmental initiatives that will address several of the conditions that cause citizens of various African countries to flee from those countries. So I want to put it as positive as that on this Emancipation Day.
Thank you very, very much, Ambassador Comisiong. Osei, would you would like to add anything from the AU perspective on the brain drain issue?
Yes, on behalf of the Commissioner, perhaps. So within the AU Commission, we have a directorate that is responsible for advising member states on how to develop and implement, actions that will more or less address the conditions that lead to this particular phenomenon in terms of brain drain. So I think, as we can all imagine, this is it's a factor of some of the weaknesses that we have in our system, with the shortage of opportunities both in education, in employment, and in livelihoods as well. So I think CEDAW is working to advise the AU Commission to look at how we can work with the member states to sort of address some of these structural difficulties, because at the end of the day, it's a function of the structure that we have on the continent that pushes people. So the way we need to address is at that level through providing more opportunities for our populations.
Chairperson, can I make slight remarks?
Yes, please. If you'd like to respond, yes, go ahead.
I wish to suggest to you that there are perhaps other ways of looking at this. Brain drain is a fundamental problem, and it is historical. Enslavement was the first form of brain drain, and then there were others. However, there are three shifts happening globally that are worth keeping our eyes on. The first is that the biggest earnings that Africa gets from external sources are from remittances. The biggest earning that countries like Mexico, like the Philippines and India get are from external earnings. So we must think about the gain of the brain in its physical proximity to the ground, but also think about the international policies that enable externally located African intelligentsia to be able to remit resources and contribute to development within. Right now, let me tell you how the circle goes. African countries are given aid by the United Kingdom or the Europeans. They use that part of that aid for education. They train health workers. Then the United Kingdom issues advertisements in African newspapers for recruitment of health workers, offering them more pay than it allows. Daniela made this point. Part of the policy conditionalities that international financial institutions impose on African governments included the public wage bill cap, which meant that governments couldn't pay people working in the public sector beyond a certain amount. Well educated, they were not trained in the United Kingdom. They were trained, so the number of Africans working in Europe, in Canada and elsewhere who were trained in those countries is actually less than 25% of the brain drain problem. The bulk were trained in their own countries up to master's and PhD level, and were found beneficial and usable. If you looked at the NHS, the British National Health Service during the pandemic, most of the medical folk that you saw who were on the front line of the pandemic were from the developing world, including Africans. At one time, there were more Zimbabwean health workers who had died in the United Kingdom than had contracted COVID and died in Zimbabwe. So part of the international incentive system, other than just the sending factors, which is whether it's the repression, mismanagement, or corruption, need to be considered. This conversation we are having is about creating an ecosystem for transformation. The second factor I would like you to look at as the world goes more to working virtually, we ordinarily would have had this conference sitting somewhere in Ghana or elsewhere. We are having a very fundamental conversation about our historical and future solidarity. We're doing it virtually. Google, Amazon, and a lot of American companies, Uber, are making money in Kenya, in South Africa, and elsewhere, but they are not taxed within those countries. The restructuring of the global taxation system and also understanding how labor within virtual markets, the same revolution that we had with the post-Fordist mode of production, where we had one component made in one country and another in another country in order to minimize tax and labor costs, is what we are entering a moment where beyond our reliance on mining, on agriculture, the virtual economy, as we've seen in Kenya with mobile money and other innovations, has beginning to take root. The African Caribbean People's Summit must address itself to a fundamental question: how not to become the footnote of the future global economy, which is virtual, which is financialized, which is militarized. It is important that we understand that, because the new terrain of global power is dominated, as my brother Samir Amin used to say, by a global plutocracy, big pharmaceuticals, right? Big tech companies, big so and so. I don't believe for a moment that we need any more expertise coming from the diaspora to the continent. I've been part of the African Vaccine Initiative, both the independent one led by Quoda and stuff. We have a lot of experts on the continent, from virologists to immunologists to so and so. They are not used, partly because the structure of the public sector in our states has been geared only to absorb external expertise, ignoring internally available expertise. So we end up creating an apartheid system when we're dealing with expertise. So I want to suggest to you, there are pockets of Africans who don't know what exists. If you go onto the Quoda website and the launch in Nigeria just 2-3 weeks ago of the Africa Independent Commission on Vaccines, where a private university in Nigeria, Ibenidion University, and people from the Africa Development Bank, people from the Afro-Exim Bank, and the initiative within the Africa CDC were African experts, because they began to do a compilation. There were lots of experts who said, hey, I'm here, I work for these big pharmaceuticals, I'm back home, I'm retired. I've offered to help in the government, but nobody was willing to listen, because we wait until there is a disaster for us to get. We still get external people to try and help African countries with the mining contract. When you talk to elites, they say that there is no expertise in Africa. I can tell you for free, I know dozens of lawyers with expertise in mining, with expertise. So I want to say to us that this conversation must really be based on a totally different premise. We are engaging the future, because the reproduction of white supremacy and racism going into the future is dependent upon the lessons we have not learned in our historical solidarity. If we don't learn anything, we'll reproduce it.
Thank you very, very much, my brother. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
I'd like to share a different perspective. I'd like to share.
Yes, go ahead,
very
Sakaya.
First of all, we can't think of remittance as a development strategy. Think of remittance from the developed capitalist world as a development strategy. Yes, it helps, and it helps to overcome the problem my immediate family has. And yes, it does provide foreign exchange to a certain extent, but that's not a development strategy. It's a temporary relief. If we are going to talk about development strategy, we need to look at some long-term strategy that would have multidimensional impact on the economy, and that is sustainable. And I could say to you, my brother, I live in Toronto, And I could tell you that one of the bureaus that I live, there's more Ghanaian doctors trained in Ghana from primary school to graduation as a doctor, not trained in Canada. Many of them come here to do postgraduate work, but there are more Ghanaian doctors living in Canada and in Ghana itself. That is not coming from Sakaya Thomas. This is coming from a group of Ghanaian Doctors Association. I have a member of the, is it academic? Member of the Global African Congress. Last week he participated in a meeting. Over 100 Ghanaian scholars in Canada. Okay? He participated in a meeting last week, over 100, and I'm talking about at the PhD level. So I am suggesting to you that that level of brain drain is not accidental. What we need to do is a more scientific approach where we do evidence gathering. We begin to talk to some of these people who are leaving the countries as to why. Why is it the Canadian government would seize on the opportunity because there's a pandemic to grant special status to Nigerian professional and Ethiopian professional? And I'm not talking off the top of my head, my brother. I could give you concrete evidence where this is occurring. And
I don't know what we are disagreeing on. I was simply saying to you, look at it using two lenses.
Yes,
right?
yes. I'm going to.
That's all I was saying to you. There are strategies on the continent. William has already said the African Union and NEPA have a very comprehensive return of the reversal of brain drain. But I'm saying, if you're looking for development finance and resources, you either get it through trade, you get it through aid, or you find creative ways, or you earn it from beneficiation. And not all remittances are just family sustenance. Some of the greatest things that have happened in Ethiopia on infrastructure development have been around diaspora remittances. So I'm saying, let's look at the ecosystem of transformation, not a very narrow. And Africa actually, it's not the PhDs that we need to develop. It is the artisans, the electricians, the builders, the people who put together. And it's important that we actually realize that doctors are very important, nurses are very important, everybody is very important. But let's look at a comprehensive set. What does the continent need to move? Micro infrastructure, local economic development, national infrastructure, regional value chains. And if the African Union has comprehensive plans on all this, including transnational infrastructure and what we call the African manpower question or person power question.
Okay, thank you very much, brother. I really do have to beg people to, one, manage their time, and two, to listen to the chair. Otherwise, the chair has to become very intrusive. Otherwise, we'll never finish this afternoon's proceedings, and we've been started since this morning. So I'm going to give our main speakers who are still with us 1.5 minutes to conclude, because time now, we're really beyond our time. So may I invite those who were our main speakers. I know our brother has taken a number of minutes already, but we've not heard from, in conclusion, I'd like, if you have 1.5 minutes, what would you like to say in response to what has been raised here today? And if His Excellency Adeoye has been able to stay the distance with us, I would give him that 1.5 minutes. I give Mr. Osei that 1.5 minutes, followed by Dr. Hilary Brown, if she's been able to stay the course with us. Mr. Brian Tamukara has had about 8 or 10 minutes, but I'll still give him that 1.5 minute. And then our final speaker, Ambassador Commission. So if His Excellency Adeoye is still with us, I would give him that 1.5 minutes. If not, I move immediately to Mr. Osei.
Yes, Dr. Asha, the ambassador has had to take his leave, yes. But I will speak on his behalf, if I may. I think for us it's quite simple in terms of the way forward. We want these conversations, these dialogues to lead to a rapprochement between the two regions, not only at the popular level, like, at the CSO level that we are doing now, but also at the institutional level, because I think that a lot of this work can only really gather momentum when it is kind of captured through some sort of institutional framework that we can execute, that can take on a momentum of its own, whether it is me here on this side today or somebody else that replaces me tomorrow. We need to have an institutional process and a structure that provides a framework for the way that the two regions coordinate and collaborate going forward. And this is why, I'm very happy to see Dr. Brown here, because we have been at the CARICOM Secretariat twice and had conversations with His Excellency Ambassador Larocque. And one of the things that came up was how to finally bring some closure to this MOU that has been sort of, in some sort of in the wilderness, really. Exactly.
Limbo.
It's been in limbo for way too long. And we have started from, even though we are not located currently in Addis, we have started to bring a little bit of visibility and some reminders back to our bosses in Addis to try to get this finally over the line. And I think, I invite the cooperation of Dr. Brown and colleagues from CARICOM. We extend our availability as well to make sure that we can finally join hands and get this done. Hopefully for Ambassador Larocque to come to one of the summits of the African Union, so that we can have Ambassador Larocque and Chairperson Faki Mahamat sign this document once and for all, so that we can then proceed to what comes next. So that really will be my call to action for today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Say. Thank you, brother. Thank you. Can I then have our Dr. Hilary Brown? Can we have Dr. Brown? Are you still with us? Yes, thank you. She's been able to stay the course, as they say.
It's been a really fascinating and very rich exchange. I think before I just make those concluding remarks, I just wanted to comment, though, on some of what Daniel Frederick said, because I wouldn't want this forum to leave thinking that that the central message of the reparations claim being advanced by the Caribbean is around the matter of continuing harm. If you look carefully at the 10-point plan, you will see that in relation to health, education, the indigenous people, the debt problem, the psychological scarring, every element of the 10-point plan makes that link to the historical, to the present. And in fact, in my own presentation this morning, I said that we know that the protracted period of exploitation is fundamentally at the core of the contemporary reality of persistent poverty among people of African descent. So I want to assure Ms. Frederick that this is central. And in fact, our legal advisors made it very plain to us from the beginning that we will not be able to successfully, or it will be more difficult to advance the reparations claim if we are not able to show continuing harm to the present. And we know that the systems, the systematic racism that we see in the present is directly linked to the past. So I want to emphasize that that is the central argument of the reparations claim being advanced, not that we are only focusing on long-time atrocities. And then I would like to say that how pleased I was to also be in this forum with everyone present and to really be able to advance the dialogue with the African Union on how we can continue the collaboration to move this forward. I heard Mr. Osei talk about an upcoming cultural exchange, and I would like to highlight that we're hoping that CARIFESTA 15, the Caribbean Festival of Arts, will happen in Antigua and Barbuda in August of 2015. We're working hard, hoping that the pandemic will allow, and if so, that may be a wonderful opportunity to facilitate some of that exchange. And to say that I agree we need to really fast track the signing of the MOU and to see how we can work within the UN using the new AFCAR body and other mechanisms, the Durban high-level panel that's coming up in September, to see how we can really mobilize as Africa and the Caribbean to advance our common agenda, and in particular, the need for reparations, reparatory justice. So thanks again to all the organizers for having me. It has been a really very rich experience. And happy Emancipation Day blessings to everyone within the region and the diaspora. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hilary Brown. And I give the floor again now to Mr. Brian Kaguro for his 1.5-minute closing remarks.
Chair, thank you. Thank you to the brothers and sisters in the Caribbean for this spirit. I think not only did Marcus Garvey and all the great Caribbean Pan-Africanists reiterate our oneness. I think that the 10-point plan that you have in CARICOM enable us to work on content, which is around trade, debt, climate, security, human capacity questions. But we have an opportunity, which is what this conference has told us, around coordination, planning, and execution of very specific things. And I would suggest that there are 5 commissions that are implied if we want to not only have a small group engaging, but a much larger church or broad church. And I take it from what my brother Mwalimu said, which is one, the liberated intellectual zones or thinking zones, bringing intellectuals from the Caribbean and Africa in a very structured way. And thank you, ECOSOC, for beginning to think about it and doing it. And then the cultural festivals, bringing our people together in these cultural exchanges. They already are exchanging. So this is not new, we're not starting it. Number 3, science and technology. One of the most interesting things in this vaccine nationalism or vaccine apartheid is how science, the solidarity between Caribbean nations and African nations. And Dr. David Komisong, Ambassador, you spoke about it. We need to bring our scientists. We need to bring our people in science and tech. We need to bring them together, because part of how we will survive, not just this pandemic, but future pandemics, is bringing our people together to think, to plan, to share knowledge, to share research, and to share skills. And I'm quite sure, given who we are and where we are, this is. The second is to bring the mothers and the sisters from the Caribbean and Africa together. This liberation, this revolution will not work without rehumanizing Caribbean African women who often suffer from the global production system that Ambassador Komisong talked about, but also suffer from patriarchy generated even within and amongst us who claim to be correct. And then the youth. I think the energy, the vigor, the vibrancy that we need to take this forward. A lot of us, are approaching certain ages where we need to ensure that young people understand the motivations of our struggle, the values, the principles. And we have an opportunity of gathering these young people who energize because they have new ideas, they're innovative, there are many things that they bring. And that intergenerational conversation about our historical struggles and our shared future and imaginaries is important. And lastly, our business folk. And I think it is my brother Sekaya who talked about the business folk. And I'll just urge us that if we're going to go take this a notch higher, let's gather these commissions. Let's get them working in the build up to what we want to do. And of course, I support the signing of the MOU, but I'd say let the work begin just the same way that this has happened. I'm most grateful for having been given the opportunity to share a platform with such outstanding Pan-Africanists and great sons and daughters of the soil. Thank you. Thank you, Chair, for indulging me, and sorry for being argumentative. I will not do it again.
Thank you very much, my brother. I would beg our Ambassador Komisong to allow me to have the audience enjoy a video from Brother Matthew Tembo before he gives his closing remarks is, I hope that's agreeable to Ambassador. Tembo is an award-winning Afro-pop musician from Zambia, but based now in South Africa, and he's an ambassador of Zambian music and culture. Can we have Brother Tembo's music, and then we will have the closing remarks from Ambassador Commission? Thank you.
This is Matthew Tembo, all the way from Zambia. I have two friends with me here. There's Chunks on bass, and we have Master on guitar. I'd like to thank ECOSOC, African Union, for organizing the event, and I'm so excited to be performing on this platform, People to People. We're going to play you a song entitled Prayer for Africa, and we would like to pray for all Africans from wherever they may be, the whole world over. We want total freedom as Africans, we want total independence. So this one. Afrika mwana wangu uniwe, oh yelele uniwe. Afrika mwana wangu uniwishe, oh yelele uniwe. Sunga wana wako mwana wangu, oh yelele Afrika. Yesha wana wako mwana wangu, oh yelele Afrika. Wenze wewa mamkabudula kanjowani, tenderete uona mkabudula kanjowani. Tengo kuticho kepo, wenda sipambukila. Lelo ase watu wakasha, kani wechizende. Wana kakula akosi tundila niko moniata, ichonchizende. Wana kakula akosi tundila niko moniata. Wana kakula akosi tundila niko moniata, ichonchizende. Afrika mana wangu akula, oh yelele uniwe. Afrika mana wangu sekundo kukula, oh yelele. Mana kakula akosi tundila nikumuniata, ichonchizende. Mana kakula akosi tundila nikumuniata, ichonchizende. Africa, what do you say, Africa? Africa, yeah. What do you got to say?
How can we thank that brother for that beautiful piece of music? And now I'm going to turn the floor over to our Ambassador David Commission to give our final closing remarks. And we really thank Matthew Tembo for that wonderful piece of music. And then we're going to bring the house down, as they say, with our own brother Valentino and the Trinidad and Tobago Steel Orchestra, so that our brothers and sisters from the continent can enjoy the Calypso music and the Steel Orchestra music to sort of close us off. We're sorry that we can't hear all the other comments that we know people want to jump in and respond to, but time really now has gotten beyond us. So Ambassador Commission, please, we give you the floor.
Thank you, Asha. Brothers and sisters, I would like to bring to your attention that the Caribbean Pan-African Network started on this relationship with the African Union way back in 2004. In fact, the very establishment of the Caribbean Pan-African Network was a collaborative effort between leading Pan-Africanists of the Caribbean and the African Union's CIDO, Citizens and Diaspora Office of the African Union, at that time led by Dr. Jimmy Adisa. And we came together in Barbados and established this Caribbean Pan-African Network. And we have kept faith with the African Union ever since then. We believe in the 6 region initiative. It has been difficult, but we have kept faith. And we have kept faith because we know that from the time we had the breakthrough of the Organization of African Unity in 1963, that Pan-Africanism had moved to a level where it was no longer simply about individual activists or civil society activist groups. It was also about our governments, nations, and our own multilateral organizations, such as the African Union and the Caribbean Community. And therefore, we have to make all of these entities work. It's not one or the other. It's not a Pan-Africanism of the people versus a Pan-Africanism of the governments or the nations or the multilateral institutions. We fought those battles in 1945 when we had the Manchester Conference, and Kwame Nkrumah and others went out to form political parties and to win governments and to take the countries into independence. We understood we were taking our struggle to a higher level. And so we have to make that higher level. We have to make all of these structures work for us positively. And it is so pleasing to me to see where our Caribbean governments have reached. As I said, we have been plowing away since 2004. We now have governments within our Caribbean community, and the Caribbean community itself that is serious about coming together with the African Union generally, but also on reparations, that more embassies are being established on the ground in Africa. And this is what it's all about, brothers and sisters. We are no longer at the stage where it's about mourning and simply criticizing and standing on the sidelines and pointing fingers. No, this has to be our century. We have to make it work. Sister Beryl Beekman was bemoaning the fact that quite often our governments, our Black, Caribbean, and African governments and their representatives do not represent members of the diaspora in areas in Europe and so forth. We have to get to that stage where all of us, all of our governmental representatives understand that their responsibility is not simply to their own nationals, but it's to the entire global African family. And we get to that stage through reparations, because to the extent that any country, any government embraces the reparations campaign, it means that they're embracing the notion that they have a responsibility not only to their own nationals, but to the entire African family, because reparations is the reparations claim, the reparations cause is interconnected. We really can't separate it. We can't separate the reparations cause of the Caribbean from that of Africa, where our ancestors came from, or from our brothers and sisters in North America or Europe. It is one interconnected struggle. So to the extent that we can bring our governments on board and get them to embrace the reparations effort, it means we then insist that you must now have a sense of responsibility for all African people. And there's so much, look, there's so many resources we have. You talk about COVID-19 vaccines. Well, in the Caribbean, we have produced at least 2 COVID-19 vaccines, and there are another two or three candidates in play as well. I'm talking about the vaccines produced by the Caribbean nation of Cuba. And right now, right here in Barbados, we are talking about a lot more biotechnology cooperation and working together with Cuba. In the Caribbean, we are working on our single market and single economy. You have just established your continental free trade area on the African continent. We must see the Atlantic Ocean as just a pond that we can easily bridge. We need to bring together our single market, our single economy, the African continental free trade area. So the resources are there. We just have to open our eyes and see them. Our University of the West Indies, over the past 8 years or so, our University of the West Indies has established 10 international centers in different parts of the world, but 2 of those centers are in Africa. There's a University of Lagos Center for African and Diaspora Culture, and there's the University of Johannesburg Center for Global Africa. In addition, the University of the West Indies has a joint master's program with the University of Ghana. So, brothers and sisters, on this Emancipation Day, the message I am bringing, I am bringing a positive message. I know that we can, we can critique and we can find many weaknesses and deficiencies, but I am saying that there are many positive and hopeful signs. There are many positive and hopeful developments. We have to grab hold of them, and we have to nurture them, and we have to take them through to their full blossoming. This is no time for excuses. This is time for us to insist that we are bringing our victory home. Just like our ancestors in places like Haiti brought that victory home against the most formidable foes, the greatest armies of Europe, the armies of France and Spain and Britain. We won the victory. So too, we African people, we must think, the United Nations has declared a decade for people of African descent. Well, we must think of a whole century. We must think of the balance, the remaining what, 79 years of this 21st century. That must be our frame of reference. And we must roll out a development program for global Africa and bring it to fruition. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Commission, for those words of wisdom. And we're going to hear some words of wisdom as well now from our artist, Brother Valentino. Can I have that wonderful clip of Brother Valentino singing and chanting and thinking about Stay Up Zimbabwe? And he does it, Stay Up Zimbabwe, not just for Zimbabwe, but for all of us in Africa, on the continent, and in the diaspora. I give you Brother Valentino. I'm not sure what happened there, but I think it's coming. Do we have Brother Valentino?
We'll be unto Rhodesia, we'll be unto South Africa. You're pushing my back against the wall, I'm calling the tribes of Hannibal. A man decide to put on his boots and march to defend his roots. Say, all in them Zulu, all in them Chichu, shouting Ashanti, all in what you see. Africa and Rhodesia, let's go run like water. Prepare my brother, or this bloody river. Just remember, brother, blood is come and water. Stay up Zimbabwe, stay up Zimbabwe, stay up Zimbabwe, stay up Zimbabwe.
Yes, yes, yes. And that was the music from Trinidad and Tobago, our Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force, playing Stay Up Zimbabwe. That is a very, very old piece when Zimbabwe and Mugabe were fighting against Ian Smith and Rhodesia. So that's how long this solidarity has been ongoing in between Africa and the Caribbean. Very, very long, as Brother Kamisang said. Let's bring the victory home in this century. Let's bring it home in our lifetime. Thank you all very much. I think that's all that's left for me to do is say thank you to the African Union. Thank you to ECOSOC. Thank you to CARICOM. Thank you to all the participants, the many, many participants. We had over 100 participants with us today. We want to thank them all. I know there wasn't sufficient time for all the discussion we wanted to have, but I think what discussion we did have was very rich and very telling. I'm sure there's much that people learned. I, who think I'm sitting at the heart of this endeavor, learned quite a lot today. So if I can conclude by saying that I've learned, I'm sure everyone else who participated learned quite a bit. So we thank you very, very much. And we turn over to our colleagues who will close the meeting. And that is our African Union platform who have the authority to close the meeting. So we thank you all very much. Zikomo, as they would say in